Our first question that we like to toss out is really for you to explain obviously what has motivated you to run and what difference it would have made if you had been on the council during the last 4 years.
Well, let me start with the first one. Motivated to run. This has actually been something I have thought about for a long time. I grew up outside of Chicago. My dad was a precinct captain in the little town that we lived in. One of my earliest memories as a boy is walking precincts with my dad and dropping campaign literature off at on people's front porches and hanging things on their doorknobs. And I know I was pretty young at the time because we were still handing out matchbooks that had the candidate's name on them. So mid-50s probably. And he got involved. He was a city attorney for our town, and he was in the state legislature, and not really interested in politics, but interested in being a good citizen. And I admire him a lot for what he did. So it's something I've thought about for a long time. I came to Palo Alto. I first came to Palo Alto in 1985 when we opened the office for the law firm, but moved here in 1990 with my family. I had a young daughter at the time, and I was responsible for. I was the managing partner of the office, and it was my job to really build that office, and I frankly didn't have time. The firm then came to us and asked me to take on another set of responsibilities, but it involved moving to Japan. And then we asked to move again, this time to Washington, D.C., and finally, when we actually thought we were going to be coming back, we were asked to go to London for a year, which was not a hard duty. So we really only got back to Palo Alto at the very end, virtually, basically December of 2012. But one of the reasons, there were a couple of reasons we decided to come back to Palo Alto. First, we kept our house here, but this was really what we considered to be home and where we wanted to live long term. And one of the things that was attractive to me about that was the ability to get involved. And it's actually something I had talked to people about, particularly John Kelly, who, Bill, I think you know, John Kelly and Lisa Van Dusen, over the years about getting involved. So I got back, and John came to me and said, you really ought to get involved in this council race, and so I did.
And how would you have made a difference if you'd been on the council?
Really hard to say, because I can't tell you that I have gone back and studied every issue that's come before the council in the last 4 years. I would like to think that I would have helped avoid some of what I see as a division in the community. Clearly, and again, I was not involved in it at the time, but the Measure D battle has created divisions in the community, which I think, had it been handled with a little more discussion and finesse, it needn't have.
So how would you characterize this election and its meaning? What's this election about from your perspective?
It really, from my perspective, the election really seems to be about what direction Palo Alto is going to take. Because when I go to the farmer's market and or to coffees and so on and talk to people, I hear two different things. I hear some people saying, we've grown too fast, we've grown too much, we've just got to stop. And other people, and I think, no, we can't stop. And frankly, I'm in the camp of people who believes that given where Palo Alto is, kind of the center of the most economically vibrant area in the world, and given our reputation for innovation, Palo Alto, can't say no to everything. But I think we need to be a lot smarter about how we move forward.
And do you feel that there are candidates in this race whose philosophy is to say no to everything?
I can't tell you that. What I can say is that that's what some of the people out in the community are. That's what I'm hearing from them.
On what issues do you think that the city should immediately become smarter in its decision making or processes?
Well, I think the main thing, what I mean by that is I think we need to update the comprehensive plan, which will set the framework, the blueprint for what kind of development occurs. And I know that's underway, but there's still a number of steps to be taken before that's finalized. I know that there's been a lot of community input, but I hope there will continue to be community input into that plan, because I think it really does set the blueprint. It should be the guiding principle for how we want the city to grow.
Some people say that with a comprehensive plan you can find just about any support for what you want to do in it. So it's down to the specifics and how those principles are applied.
Right.
So would you favor a different process for the council, or are you looking at changing zoning requirements?
Well,
how does that work out practically once we have the update?
I think that we may have to change zoning requirements. I think that we could do, for example, one of the things that I'm interested in seeing is more housing, particularly a broader range of housing, affordable housing for people in Palo Alto. I think there are people who are priced out of Palo Alto who should be members of our community. I think that our teachers, our policemen, our firefighters, our seniors who are currently living in homes but would like to downsize, but to do it they'd have to move out of the community. I mean, so I would like to see that. So I think that looking at sites that would be appropriate for additional housing and making sure that either the zoning is correct or we use a specific area plan to make sure that we get the kind of housing that we want in those sites.
And where do you think that housing should be?
I think it should be either near a transit hub or near local shopping. I mean, the goal would be to have housing where people can walk to get to either transit, their job, or shopping, so that we don't build housing and therefore create a lot more traffic.
And the Maybell development that the voters overturned, how would you characterize that in terms of the statement you just made?
I don't know all of the details of the Maybell project. I'm in favor of additional senior housing, so I think that in general the idea of having more housing was a good one. I understand that there were disagreements about whether there was sufficient local shopping to satisfy what I would think are important criteria, but I haven't gone back to analyze that.
How did you vote on Measure D?
I voted for it.
Okay, thanks.
Some people would look at the housing pressures that are facing our area and point a finger at ABAG and the mandates that that group has put on cities across the state. And yes. I'm just wondering, are you in favor of legislative advocacy, or do you think that the mandates are perfectly fine and reasonable?
Well, I'm certainly in favor of presenting our case to ABAG, but I mean it is the law. I don't think we can ignore it, and I have heard people again out in the community say we should just ignore it. Just it'll be 10 years before we lose any lawsuit they bring, so we should ignore it. I just don't agree with that.
Let's going to move on to traffic.
No, I want to stick with this for a second.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the general, you've talked about housing. I'd like to talk a little bit about commercial development.
Yeah.
You've indicated that there may be a need for some zoning changes once the comprehensive plan process is completed. Do you see any urgency in zoning changes prior to that?
Yeah.
That might need to occur? If so, what would they be?
Yeah. I listened to the discussion at the City Council about that question about whether we should be waiting for the comprehensive plan before we do any zoning changes. I frankly would like to get the comprehensive plan set because I think it's important to have the overall plan before you start looking at specific areas and kind of do a hodgepodge development. I think there's been some of that, and I think that it would be much better to have an overall concept and then say, all right, now we're going to implement the concept.
What is it about the current comprehensive plan that you feel needs to be modified?
Well, I think that, under the current comprehensive plan, as I understand it, we do have enough housing sites to satisfy the ABAG requirement, at least if you look at the zoning. But I think that we have not, the current comprehensive plan doesn't kind of give as much direction to where that should be as I think would be preferable.
I was referencing commercial development in particular.
Sorry.
Is there any you said you wanted to wait for the comprehensive
Right.
plan and then implement possible changes. So my question is, in the area of commercial zoning in town and the guidance that the comprehensive plan provides, what is it about the current comprehensive plan that you would want to change that might then lead to the zoning changes you're describing?
Well, to be honest, I haven't focused a lot on the commercial development. I don't think we need a lot more office space. Certainly, office space that would not have a ground floor retail component or maybe a housing component with it. So I've been focused more on the housing.
Okay. And then on the planned community zone, I wonder if you could share with us your thinking about what reforms, if any, you'd like to see in the planned community zone.
Well, again, I think having a comprehensive plan is helpful there because my sense is that the planned community zone has been used, again, for some kind of hodgepodge ad hoc development because a project has come up and it's had some attractive features. I wouldn't toss the planned community zone out completely, but I think that it should be used only in special occasions, and I think that we have to be much stricter about what are the public benefits that a developer is offering in return for the variances that he or she's going to get with the planned community zone, and I think we've got to be a lot better about then making sure that the community actually gets the public benefits that have been promised.
So there's only been a couple, 3 PCs in the last few years. What's your assessment of them in terms of what you just said? Did you object to those being adopted?
Again, I have not gone back in time and looked at things. I mean,
well, the most recent one is the 101 Lytton project, the so-called Gateway project.
Right.
How would you have voted on that?
I don't know all the details of that. I don't know exactly what the public benefits were that were associated with that. I think well, I'll leave it at that.
I'll give you my version of what those benefits
all right.
were. Basically, in exchange for being able to develop approximately 50,000 square feet of office space, where about 17,000 would have been allowed into the zoning, the developer paid the city about $4 to $5 million in cash. Part of that was designated to future parking development, part of it affordable housing. But the public benefits really amounted to a cash payment to the city of Palo Alto.
I'm less excited about cash payments than I would be about a kind of a tangible benefit that was directly associated with the project.
So let's give an example of that, which was the JJNF PC that is now kind of in hiatus as
Right.
the developer tries to meet the council's conditions. Would you have supported that?
Again, I don't know all the details of it, so it's very hard for me to say I would have supported it. I would not have supported it.
Okay.
One of the concerns that residents have is retail and the loss of mom and pop type shops, both the locally owned shops and also the type of stores where you can go for services that we all need. And I'm wondering, what do you think could be done, or what would you favor in terms of trying to keep some sort of balance of the retail that residents want versus the free market and the economic vitality that comes?
I don't have a specific answer to that, but I would like to see a balance of local retail versus chains. But I have not come to grips with the exact mechanics of doing that. I think you can do it through zoning.
So you wouldn't be in favor of a ban per se on chain stores in certain areas?
Well, I suppose it depends on the area, and it's also going to depend a little bit on what you call a chain. But off the top of my head, I would say I would like to see a balance, and whether you can do that, whether the only way you can do that is through a ban of chain stores, then I'd want to look hard at that.
Sure. Talking about El Camino for a second, because talking about in places in town where certain things make sense versus in other places of town. The Grand Boulevard Initiative has been laid out for an intensification along El Camino. And overall, do you support that kind of construction and design?
Well, I don't support all of the construction and design that's gone on so far. In that, I think that the developments that come right up to the sidewalk on El Camino do kind of create a bowling alley effect. On the other hand, some of El Camino is not very attractive, and when you bring visitors to Palo Alto and you drive along El Camino, they kind of say, "This is Palo Alto. This is what I've heard about. This great city." So I think we can do a lot better on El Camino.
The city is currently going through a process of looking at exactly those things, the sidewalks, the widths. And,
yes.
The idea of height, though, do you have a feeling on whether you would favor taller buildings uniformly throughout the corridor?
Not uniformly. I think that the tall buildings can be appropriate. Again, if they're in a place near a transit node where a tall building isn't going to necessarily mean a lot more cars. I don't think you want to have tall buildings, again, that are built right on the sidewalk. I don't think you want tall buildings that are going to be built right next to residential streets. But I think that having step backs to allow greater height could make sense.
When you say tall buildings, what do you mean?
Well, I was just picking up the word that Jocelyn used.
Okay, what did you mean?
How many stories are we talking about here?
Yeah. Well, I know that we have a 50-foot height limit. I think that translates in most cases to about 4 stories. I think, again, depending on the building and the location, 4 stories is probably as tall as you want to go.
I want to ask about parking before we entirely leave the development topic. The city has spent years debating and with a lot of false starts and a lot of can kicking down the road, the issue of parking downtown. How would you define your view of what should occur downtown in the way of parking, residential parking controls and so on?
So I live in downtown South, so I'm very aware of the parking situation, and I've also lived in cities, Washington D.C., that has residential parking permits, so I'm familiar with the pros and I will say cons to residential parking permits. We clearly need to do something about parking. It's kind of the number one thing that traffic and parking together are the number one thing that people out there are talking about and are angry about. So it clearly has to be addressed. I think that we're going to get a residential parking permit system, we're told, by the end of this year, beginning of next year. I think there are going to be kinks in that system. I would be very surprised if it works perfectly. I think that I'm not sure I'm not sure how it isn't just going to move the problem to a slightly more remote neighborhood. So I think it's good to try it because I think we've got to start somewhere and experiment. But my guess is there's going to be a lot of working with that. I know that the staff has a number of things that they're studying, which actually look quite interesting to me. Some of the use of technology to let people know where there are available parking places. I know, for example, that on many days when people are complaining that they can't find a place to park, there's no one parked on the top floor of the Cowper garage. Now, part of that problem is that they may not know that those spots are available. Part of the problem may be that the elevators aren't working, and so they're not interested in walking the 6 stories or whatever it is, 4 stories up there. But I think so there are some technological things, and I think that we need to look at pricing parking. It costs the city to build parking places, and people get value from being able to park there.
So how would you deal with the problem that really is a big part of what's happening in the neighborhoods around downtown, which is the lower paid service workers in downtown who cannot afford to buy parking permits? You just suggested that we raise the price of parking. You also are agreeing that you're going to impose restrictions on who can park in the neighborhoods. So where are the dishwashers?
No, I said we're going to get a parking permit program, and I want to see how it works.
All right.
Okay.
Does that mean you're opposed to it?
No,
Okay,
I want to see. I want to see how it works. But obviously, one of the things that has to be accommodated is lower paid workers who are critical to restaurants and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Whether you do that through a separate kind of permit, or you have certain spaces available in the residential neighborhoods, that some are reserved for people with permits and others are not. That's kind of one of the kinks that I think has to get worked out.
Seems like another thing that's happening downtown is that some of the companies that are moving in have a whole lot more employees than the companies that were there before.
Sure.
And the funding, the formulas for determining parking are perhaps a little bit at odds with reality. What do you think as a city council member that you would do about that issue of the parking deficit?
Yeah, parking deficit, we either need to get people out of their cars and provide incentives to do that, or we may need to look at more parking. So I guess that's the short answer.
Okay.
Can I just,
Yeah.
do you agree with the premise of that question?
That the workplaces have become denser? Absolutely.
So does that mean you support changing the formulas that dictate the amount of required parking that a new development must provide?
I haven't looked at the current formula. I know that there have been buildings built in downtown where the city council intentionally under provided for parking. That I don't think we should be doing. I think, you know, we should definitely be ensuring that if there's a new building going up, there's sufficient parking for the folks who are expected to work there. But changing the formula.
The logic of that is that all these people are going to commute on the train.
Well, no, they're not all going to commute on the train.
But I mean, they're allowed to provide less parking than is required because the rationale is that it's all going to be fine.
Has it worked? I don't think it's worked. I think that I mean, the Stanford has done a really good job with this. It's a little easier if you're a single employer, but that's something we could be looking at. You know, making people who are making buildings that are going to have workers, make them provide a certain amount of transit passes for their tenants, so that we get people out of their cars.
I wanted to touch upon the two measures that are on the ballot this November and get your feeling. The reduction of the council size from 9 to 7. What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, on that one, it's very odd for me as someone running for the council for the first time to say, well, a council should be 9 or 7. I don't have a position on that.
Okay.
On Measure B, the TOT tax, I'm very strongly in favor of kind of repairing our infrastructure, and I understand that that's what that tax will accomplish, and therefore I'm in favor of that.
Would you have supported, instead of a 2% increase, a 3% increase? That was entertained earlier this year.
I don't know. I mean, I've looked at the proposal as it is, but I did not look at what the pros and. I mean, obviously, the 3% would generate more revenue. That's good, but there's obviously a downside to that too in terms of what it does to business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the issue of fair share of funding of city services. Do you see any kind of imbalance between the amount of revenue that residents are contributing versus businesses?
I've seen statistics that go both ways on that. You know, because if you look at the sales tax versus the property tax, and so I don't, can't say that I've gotten to the bottom of that and know the. But right now, I would say I don't know the answer.
There's quite a stalemate in process over the Coverly site and in negotiations between the city and the school district as to whether that lease should encompass the covenant not to develop and a bunch of other issues. What's your how would you lead the council out of that situation? And
well, is the issue on the council side or on the school district side? But
that's part of the question.
Yeah, I understand kind of the overall aspects of the negotiation. I think it probably doesn't make sense for the city to continue to pay for a covenant not to develop. On the other hand, I think that money could be used to rebuild the infrastructure at Coverly. And I'm certainly in favor of the city reaching an agreement with the school district to continue the lease.
What in your view is the reason to have that lease at this point? The school district can lease out its property to the end users just as easily as the city can. So why are we in this lease?
Well, I don't think the school district isn't in the business of renting real estate.
Neither is the city.
Well, the city is. The city has real estate and they're I think in a better position to manage that than the school district.
So that's why a lease is.
Well, the city owns eight acres of that land. It makes sense to have both of those parcels kind of work in conjunction. I think it makes sense for the lease to continue.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure we had time to talk about the lower income residents in town.
Right.
And the movements addressing them. So the car camping ban was proposed, adopted, and then a moratorium's on that. What should be done about people living in their cars and the friction that's caused with residents?
Well, first of all, there's a lawsuit going on right now down in Los Angeles that will give some guidance on the legality of the ban. So, I think the city is right to, to look and get some guidance from that. I think what the city needs to do, and this was the homeless as well, is do whatever it can to kind of help those people either get services that they need. The city should also be, responding to complaints where the people who are living in cars are actually causing a nuisance in the neighborhood.
So if there's a place in town where they wouldn't be causing a nuisance, would you favor having people live in their cars there, a particular location?
I don't favor anyone living in their cars.
Oh.
I'd like to see what we can do to help those people so that they're not living in their cars.
Sure.
But I think that I'm certainly opposed to people causing a nuisance in neighborhoods. If there was a place where they could live in their cars and we couldn't get them help and they wouldn't be causing a nuisance, I don't know that I would be strongly in favor of rousting them and sending them to some other city.
Can I just ask a follow-up? So, assuming the legality is not a factor, and if this wasn't a factor, would you have supported?
I'm a lawyer. Legality is always a factor.
Well, I'm curious whether you would have supported the council's decision to ban car camping, not knowing about what's going to happen in Los Angeles and all that.
Again, I didn't look at the ban to look and see exactly what was being banned.
Okay.
I know as a lawyer you're going to be able to make up your own mind as to what you can say about Buena Vista.
Right.
But we'd like to ask you what role you feel the city has in the future development of that land, regardless of the council's decision on the acceptability or the validation of the administrative law judge's recommendations.
All right. So you're saying assume that the mobile home park is going to be closed.
Assuming that the application to close it is granted.
All right.
What role does the city have, and what would you advocate be done to influence what use is put to that property?
Right. Well, consistent with my other comments, I'm very interested in finding ways to provide additional affordable housing if that's an appropriate place for that use. I would favor trying to develop some affordable housing in that area.
You say assuming it's a good place. Does that mean you think it's a good place?
I can't tell you that I've looked in detail at that, and there's certainly no proposal at this point to look at.
Well, I guess that's the heart of the question.
Right.
Is the role of the city in a matter such as the Buena Park property to wait for a proposal from a developer, which we already had in the form of Prometheus's outline? Or is there a role for the city in creating a proposal along with the property owner that might meet what the city ideally would like to see there? And if so, what is it that you would ideally like to see there?
So I mean, I know the city can, in effect, can affect proposals by creating a specific area plan for an area. But until you raised it, I had not thought about that issue. So it's just other than the fact that would like to see us develop more affordable housing. Yeah, the city might have a role in doing that.
And so would you consider increasing the density of that zone then? Right now it's zoned, the underlying zoning is RM15. The proposal by Prometheus was a significant upzoning to accomplish their development. What would you see happening there?
I think before I really took a position on that, I would want to talk to the neighbors in that area and get a sense of what the neighborhood thinks. I haven't done it.
Okay. And I think we probably are out of time, so thank you.